The Adventures of Clarke and Rosie. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, there were two dogs named Clarke and Rosie. They were the best of friends and loved going on adventures together. One sunny day, while out exploring, they stumbled upon an abandoned couch in the middle of a field. The dogs were tired from their adventure and decided to take a nap on the cozy couch. They cuddled up together and fell fast asleep. Hours passed, and when Clarke and Rosie woke up, they realized they had slept longer than intended. They were confused as to why they were still on the couch and not at home with their owners. As they got up to stretch, they heard a loud noise coming from the distance. It was a garbage truck coming their way. Before they could react, the truck picked up the couch, with the dogs still on it, and drove away. Clarke and Rosie were terrified, as they had no idea where they were being taken. The truck drove for what felt like hours until it finally came to a stop at the dump on the edge of town. The dogs were dumped off the couch onto a large pile of garbage. They quickly realized they needed to get out of there before they were buried under more trash. Clarke and Rosie tried to climb up the pile, but it was too steep and slippery. Just when they thought they were doomed, they spotted an old tire that they could use to climb out. The tire was covered in garbage and smelled terrible, but they didn't care. They pushed it over to the pile and used it to climb out of the dump. As they looked around, they realized they had no idea where they were or how to get home. They were lost and scared. They decided to start walking and hope that they would recognize something familiar. They walked for hours, but everything looked different, and they couldn't find any recognizable landmarks. Just as they were starting to lose hope, they saw a kind man walking his dog. They ran up to him and barked for help. The man could see that they were lost and took them to the local animal shelter, where they were given food and a warm bed to sleep in. Clarke and Rosie were safe for now, but they still had a long way to go before they could find their way home. They knew they had to be brave and keep searching until they found their way back to their owners. The two dogs went to sleep, dreaming of their next adventure and the day they would finally be reunited with their families. Chapter 2. The next morning, Clarke and Rosie woke up in the animal shelter, feeling safe but uncertain of their fate. They soon discovered that the shelter was closing down, and all the animals inside would be destroyed unless they were adopted or rescued. The two dogs were determined to escape and find their way back home. They had already survived being taken to the dump and getting lost in an unfamiliar place. They knew they could overcome this challenge as well. Clarke and Rosie spent hours observing the shelter's routine, hoping to find a way out. They noticed a small window in the back of the building that was often left open for ventilation. They knew this was their chance. As soon as the shelter staff left for the day, Clarke and Rosie snuck out through the window. They ran as fast as they could, not stopping until they were far away from the shelter. However, they soon realized they were in a part of town they had never seen before. The city was bustling with noise and activity, and the dogs were overwhelmed by the chaos. They didn't know which direction to go, so they just followed their instincts. They crossed busy streets, dodging cars and bicycles. They passed through parks and neighborhoods, meeting other animals along the way. They encountered friendly cats, playful squirrels, and even a stray dog who joined them for a while. The adventure was exhilarating, but the dogs were also getting tired and hungry. They found a trash can and scavenged for food, but it wasn't enough. They needed a proper meal and a safe place to rest. They spotted a dog park in the distance and headed towards it, hoping to find some friendly faces. When they arrived, they found a group of dogs playing and barking. They approached cautiously, but the other dogs welcomed them with wagging tails and friendly sniffs. Clarke and Rosie finally got the chance to rest and play. They made new friends and shared stories about their adventures. They felt like they belonged, but they still missed their homes and families. As the sun started to set, the dogs knew they had to keep moving. They said goodbye to their new friends and set off towards the direction they hoped would take them home. They walked for hours until they were too tired to go on. They found a quiet spot under a tree and curled up together, dreaming of the day they would finally make it back home. The adventure was far from over, but Clarke and Rosie were determined to keep going, no matter what obstacles they faced. They knew they would make it home, one way or another. Chapter 3. The next morning, Clarke and Rosie woke up refreshed and ready to continue their journey. They were determined to keep moving forward, but they knew they had to be careful. They didn't want to get lost or end up in another dangerous situation. As they were walking down a quiet street, they suddenly heard growling and barking behind them. They turned around to see a pack of big, scary-looking dogs chasing them. The dogs were getting closer, and Clarke and Rosie knew they had to run for their lives. They sprinted as fast as they could, their hearts pounding with fear. The pack of dogs was getting closer and closer, snapping at their heels. Clarke and Rosie knew they had to find a place to hide. They spotted an open gate and ran towards it, hoping to find shelter. They dashed into the yard and hid behind a pile of old tires. The pack of dogs ran past them, still barking and growling. Clarke and Rosie stayed hidden until they were sure it was safe to come out. They took a deep breath and continued their journey, their tails between their legs. After a few more hours of walking, they finally reached their neighborhood. They recognized the familiar streets and houses, and they knew they were getting close to home. As they turned a corner, they saw their owners standing at the end of the street. Clarke and Rosie barked and wagged their tails, running towards their owners with joy and relief. Their owners hugged them tight and gave them lots of treats and cuddles. They had been so worried about them and were overjoyed to see them again. Clarke and Rosie were thrilled to be back home, safe and sound. They had been through so much, but they had survived and made it back to where they belonged. From that day on, they never took their home or their family for granted. They knew that they were loved and cherished, and they promised to never wander too far away again. Clarke and Rosie's adventure had come to an end, but it had taught them valuable lessons about courage, determination, and the importance of home. They were grateful for the journey and for the happy ending that awaited them. The end. Do you want to hear more stories? Then hit the subscribe button to follow our channel, so you never miss another daily story. And keep listening now, as more stories will play shortly.